today, many a times, I have lots of speech slips, right? Until I was in grade 4, I could not write a paragraph, right? I read my first book when I was in grade 7 because I couldn't read, because when you would look at a piece of paper, it would look like words to you. If I looked at a piece of paper with words on it, it was just too many words, right? And it would look like jigsaw puzzles, because the words would literally be on angles, all right? So that's typically what it was. And I want to tell you this because there might be a lot of people with insecurities about being on the khutbah stage, being in front of other people and speaking, right? And I want to tell you that if any one of you would have met me, I'm older than you, so you wouldn't have, but I'm just saying, if you had met me when I was in grade 3, you would have never thought that one day I'd be in front of people and speaking and anything would come out of my mouth. It'd be an impossibility, right? I went to a military school, we had grade exams, and most of my exams were blank, because if you can't read a question, you can't really answer that question, right? So my greatest mark was art, because in art, you didn't actually have to write anything, right? And I failed that too, by the way, but it was better than the other grades. My first khutbah was in 2010, right? It was an absolute disaster, right? It was in a dorm room, right? And it was an absolute disaster. It was at McMaster, and we had missed the actual Jummah because we were traveling. And we missed the actual Jummah. There's 12 of us. And we missed the actual time. We're like, when is the next Jummah? It's like, we only have one Jummah. We're like, what? What kind of school is this? We have one Jummah. So we ended up doing our own Jummah later. And it was an absolute disaster. In 2011, one of my high school teachers asked me to come back and do a khutbah. At that time, he realized that I was studying, and one of our teachers were the same. He was a Muslim guy. He was like, look, hey, why don't you come back and do this khutbah? So I thought this would be a good opportunity to give a khutbah, because when you're young, you think it's a good thing to give khutbahs. So I went and I gave that khutbah, and he brought me in his office after, as if I was in trouble. And then he told me everything wrong with my khutbah, right? He was a little bit more advanced in knowledge than I was. My first official khutbah was actually at a masjid. And I didn't know I was giving the Jummah khutbah. I just went with my sheikh. I just went there with him. It was early. He was supposed to give the actual khutbah. And he told me, Hassan, you have to give the khutbah today. Maybe about 40 minutes before the actual khutbah. And I said, no, sheikh, I don't think you understand how this works. He said, no, you're giving the khutbah today. It's like, I think you don't understand how this works. You're giving a khutbah. He says, no. We've studied some of the stuff in the past couple of years. Whatever you liked most, whatever stuck, do that. Meaning he's telling me to give the khutbah impromptu, right? And that was perhaps the first time I realized that if he thinks I'm ready for the khutbah, then perhaps I am, right? Then he did highlight a couple of problems in that khutbah too, but the point is that 2014 I got hired as an imam at a Fajr Musalla. So my job was to lead the Fajr Salah, and then I was hired as an imam to do the Jummah at Masjid Rahmatil Alameen. Does anyone know where that is? Masjid Rahmatil Alameen in South Mississauga by the QBW. So I was there for 4 years as their regular imam. And then I figured out the ultimate khutbah hack in 2016. The ultimate khutbah hack is exactly what we were talking about with Ibrahim and Saad. So now I cheat, which is I only prepare one khutbah per month. And I just go to different university campuses every Friday and deliver the same khutbah. What do you think happens? You guys get the third week, so that's still the refined version, right? Because there have been 2 iterations, right? UTM gets the 4th week, And what happens is that you just do the same khutbah, and you learn from your mistakes. You learn from, and it becomes very profound. And by the time the 4th week comes in, that's a set khutbah. Now, if you get invited anywhere, if you have you have to give a talk, like a talk randomly. You don't know what topic. You have a whole bank of khutbahs that you worked on, that you curated, that you worked really hard on. So that's the khutbah hack. I still don't know how those guys do it. You know those guys who do like an awesome khutbah every single week, it's well researched, everything is flowing on the tip of their tongue. I don't know how they do that. I have no clue how they do that. Yes, sir.
You do this in Sheikh and Shai. You impress us all the time.
Yeah, but I'm cheating, right? Like there's some people who don't cheat. They actually every single week, right? They're doing it properly. Like every single week is an amazing khutbah. So there's people like that. I'm definitely not like that, right? So for me, I just cheat, which is that one khutbah. This is the ultimate khutbah if you can figure this out. Inshallah ta'ala, may Allah bless you with ilm and may Allah make you of use to your communities, okay? And because we need this right now. You know, there's a khutbah crisis every Thursday. You can ask all the imams in the city. Every Thursday, the imam says, is anyone available for khutbah? This musalla, this masjid, this thing. Every Thursday, every imam gets the same messages from the same people. I'm not asking imam. It's the same thing. We have a whole crisis because people have to deal with people who are not like you guys who are sitting and studying this. They're just regular people. They don't even want to give the khutbah, but they have to because here's a company where there's 50 Muslims and there's a company Jummah and the company, the HR department has given them prayer space and everything. So one of those guys has to give the khutbah and none of those guys want to give the khutbah. So what do you think happens to everyone's Jummah, right? So that's important to recognize. So firstly, the Jummah is explicitly mentioned in the Quran. Right? When you want to study something, our epistemic sources have to be tapped into first. So we're going to breeze through this content because I'm assuming that a lot of you already know this, or when I go over it rather quickly, if you have questions you can ask later. So this is Ayatul Jumu'ah, right? 62:9. Surah Al-Jumu'ah, verse number 9. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala explicitly says, بَعْدَ أَقُولْ أَعُوذُ بِاللَّهِ مِنَ الشَّيْطَانِ الرَّجِيمِ يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا O people who claim to believe, إِذَا نُودِيَ لِلصَّلَاةِ مِنْ يَوْمِ الْجُمُعَةِ When you are called on the day of Jumu'ah for the prayer, فَسَعُوا إِلَى ذِكْرِ اللَّهِ Then hasten to the remembrance of Allah, وَذَرُوا الْبَيْعَ And let go of and abandon and ignore your preoccupations. Although it's for buying and selling, the Mufassirun say this is because of the khasiyah of what the Arabs were dealing with, the real reality behind that, because the ibrah is always am, right? The siyaq is always khas. The context is always specific, but the lesson is always timeless, right? And so for us, this would be studies. I know that's weird to hear, but if you take the majority opinion of the Mufassirun, whether you want to go to the Malikiya like Qurtubi, whether you want to go to the Hanafis like Nasafi, whether you want to go to the Shafi'iyya like Ibn Kathir, it doesn't matter which Mufassir you go to. When you go to this verse, they say al-bay' is anything mashghulun an, anything that is occupying you. That's what they're all saying. They're not saying anything else. So this could be whatever is occupying you, right? And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, ذَلِكُمْ خَيْرٌ لَكُمْ إِن كُنْتُمْ تَعْلَمُونَ This is better for you only if you knew this. If you knew this, you would understand prioritizing Jummah is better. So the first thing is that what is Jummah? So this is some conceptual things we can keep in mind. Jummah is the weekly CPR that gives us connection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We have to reconnect to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We do it in many different ways. We do it through dhikr, we do it through 5 daily salawat, we do it through fasting, all these rituals. But Jummah is one which is at a social level, right? Which is at a communal level. So it's a social ritual which strengthens the community as well. You get to see people that you don't see throughout the week, right? It must be prioritized over all things on Friday, okay? It is an event by which order is restored. For madhab, did you guys, okay, let me put it this way. Can you imagine that Hassan al-Basri lives in a city and someone else gives the Jummah khutbah? Can you imagine this? Can you imagine Malik ibn Anas lives in Medina, but how many khutbahs, Jummah khutbah, did Malik ibn Anas give? Zero. Zero Jummah khutbahs. How many khutbahs did Zero. Zero. Because it wasn't based on how knowledgeable you were that you gave the Jumu'ah khutbah. The reality of the Jumu'ah from the inception of it was always that it was to do with Islah. Part of it was to restore things in society, and therefore the person giving the khutbah was the Khalifa, and it was at a different masjid where the Khalifa can't be in two places at the same time. It was a representative of the Khalifa. The governor would give the khutbah, and if the governance was huge, the governor can't be. They would be in what's called the Masjid al-Bilad, and the khutbah would be given by an associate or a representative of the governor, like a wakil. And the idea behind the khutbah was exactly that. It was, what are things that we need to put order into? What are things we need to restore? Things that are fallen out of line that we need to put straight. There's always the remembrance of Allah. The khutbah al-hajjah that we have today was the same khutbah al-hajjah that they had throughout 1400 years. But what was the actual content of the khutbah? It was restoring what had gone wrong at a social level. This was the essence of it. If you actually read, for example, in the Ottoman Empire, who gave the khutbahs? The Imams? No. The Imams didn't give the khutbah in the Ottoman Empire. Right? The public servants who were appointed by the state, by that region, they gave the Jumu'ah khutbah. So when the Khilafah fell, one of the big discussions, by especially the Hanafis led the charge on this, but the Malikis joined it as well, is who gives the khutbah? Because who's the representative of the Khalifa now? There's no Khalifa. So who's going to give this khutbah? And there's a spectrum of views that came out, right? And this is not the topic of discussion here, but what I wanted to tell you is that restoring things that are gone wrong is a very important feature of the Jumu'ah khutbah. And you can't do that if you're not observant. You're not looking around. You're not talking to people. It's like, okay, what's actually happening? What does the people need to hear? What's gone wrong in my community? Or what's something that the community needs to address to restore order that we're not addressing? This is a very major mindset of a Khateeb at Jumu'ah. What's broken that needs fixing? That we can only fix if we come together as a community to fix. Those are topics that we should keep in mind. Talking about fixing things. Okay, it is perhaps the only time that some people get access to reminders of knowledge, which means that when you get in front and you have to talk to people and there's 50, 60, 100, 200, 300 people, and even if there's 5 people, let's say there's 5 people, is there a possibility that there's one person in there who hasn't heard a thing of khayr the whole week? And this is it. This is the only thing that they'll hear for the next 20 minutes that is there for their faith. Other than that, they're extremely secularized. Everything about their week has nothing to do with Allah or His Messenger or His book. And you get to be the lifeline between them and faith. And so you better not drop the ball, because there are people who are depending on you to rejuvenate their faith. And if you are not able to pull that off, then this person might not have faith left because they're hanging with a thread. How many people that come to Jumu'ah are coming to Jumu'ah because this is a cultural ritual for them? Because their parents brought them to Jumu'ah when they were kids and it's out of habit, right? And they don't pray the other prayers. You know, there was a poll that was done in 2018 on, so this is pre-COVID, on amount of people in the States who do their 5 daily prayers and the people who do their Jumu'ah prayers. And the discrepancy was 1 in 5. 1 in 5. So, meaning for every 5 people that is coming to Jumu'ah, right? And America's way bigger than us, by the way. Muslim community in America is huge. They don't compare it to us, right? Our numbers are going to be slightly better because the community is smaller, right? Every 5 people, if they're coming to Jumu'ah, right? 4 of them don't pray the rest of the daily prayers consistently. They're on and off. 1 guy is praying all of his prayers and coming to the Jumu'ah. The vast majority of the people, 80% of the people, are actually missing out on some prayers. Prayer is not a big part of their life. If it's a convenient prayer, they'll pray it. If others are praying, they'll pray it. It's not that they're a musallin. You won't classify them as musallin. Yeah? And but they come for Jumu'ah. This is a huge gift that Allah gave to this ummah. That Allah put love of Jumu'ah in people's hearts and they don't even know why. They just come to Jumu'ah. That they might be doing heinous sins, by the way. People involved in weird stuff. I mean, I lived on campus here, so Muslims engaged in weird things, but they'll come for Jumu'ah. It's like, how? Sometimes as a person, you're like, I can't, like 2 plus 2 not equaling 4 here. Something's off. Like, you know, I kind of know what this guy's up to, right? But they're coming to Jumu'ah. That is gift. That Allah put that in people's hearts. That people value Jumu'ah. People venerate Jumu'ah. People are respectful for Jumu'ah as an institution. And then you get to be the Khateeb to make sure that this person who's coming in, that outside of Jumu'ah, the rest of the 6 days, that there's some transformation happening in their life. So there's a level of responsibility that you need to carry with you. Okay? Okay, let's move forward. It is an added religious responsibility on the Khateeb, which is what I just said. Okay, I'm going to represent only my madhab. All the other madhabs are going to be similar on this because there's not a lot of ikhtilafat on Jumu'ah. Okay, this is from my sheikh. I'm just going to read it out. Don't mind the translation, but you know this is done in a rush. According to the Hanafi school, the Friday prayer is decisively established, meaning it's qat'i. Why? Because it's a direct verse of the Quran. So for the Hanafis, this becomes something which is not debated over. Okay, and personally obligatory, meaning it's fard ayn for men who fulfill its conditions. And the conditions of Salah are the same conditions for this, except traveling. But if you're traveling, you still have to pray. But if you're traveling in the Hanafi madhab, you're excused from Jumu'ah. Okay? The obligation is established from the words of Allah Most High, and this is the verse that we just read. The remembrance here refers to the prayer itself. Some said that it refers to the sermon, khutbah, and some said it refers to both. Either way, it establishes the obligation of coming to Jumu'ah for every single person that the conditions apply. It is also established from the words of the Prophet ﷺ. From a really long narration of Ibn Majah, the Prophet ﷺ said, know that Allah Most High has made the Friday prayer obligatory upon you. And in Timothy he says, whosoever misses 3 Friday prayers by taking the matter lightly, Allah will seal his heart. Which means if you're sick and you miss, that's not the issue, right? If you're traveling and you miss, that's not the issue. It's if you take it as if it's not a big deal to show up, then that's the issue. Therefore, as the text states, it is explicitly even more emphasized than the noon dhuhr prayer, and it is what is called for on Fridays. The Muslims have concurred from the time of the Messenger ﷺ until this day of ours that the Friday prayer is obligatory, which means, what the Shaykh is saying at the end, is that this is tawatur amali. That's what he means. It means that anyone who rejects the Friday prayer as an institution, I'm using Hanafi terms here, it is from the nawaqid al-iman. You're no longer Muslim. Okay? So, listen carefully. If you say, I'm not praying the Friday prayer, that doesn't make you a non-Muslim. But if you say there's no such thing as a Friday prayer, you reject that as an institution, because it's qat'i and it's tawatur amali, then it actually takes you out of the fold of Islam. Okay? Which means if you find someone like that, you don't get to say you're out of the fold of Islam. It's not personal, but as a theoretical rule. Everyone understands that? Other schools will comment in similar light, because as I said, there's not a lot of difference of opinion on the establishment of the Jumu'ah. The next thing I want you to look at is the ihtiram, the cautious approach and veneration to Jumu'ah that one extends is meant to be more severe than the pursuits throughout the week. Which means that there's added things you do for Jumu'ah than you do any other ritual that is weekly. I'm not talking about Hajj because it's not weekly. I'm not talking about Ramadan because it's not weekly. But when it comes to weekly rituals, there's nothing that takes precedence over Jumu'ah. Not even your 5 daily prayers. In terms of the level of preparation, mindset, things you must do to make sure that you're ready for it. Right? Okay, so let's rush through all this stuff. You should know all of these things. This is from Ustadh Umair. Ustadh Umair from Taqwa Academy. He designed this from Ifaba. And again, in all of these things, the madhabs don't disagree. You guys, their nuances are there, but there's no major disagreements of the madhabs on this. Okay, so take a full shower or ghusl, which is the reason it says full is that it's not the same thing as wudu, right? So ghusl, and apply some oil on your hair. This basically means have some form of presentation aspect to it. Have some form of presentation aspect to the Jumu'ah. Salman al-Farisi reported from the Prophet ﷺ said that he said, on the day of gathering, Jumu'ah, every man who bathes cleans whatever he can of himself. This is for the Hanafis, Humam and others, they actually argue to use Jumu'ah as a day of other tahara things as well, like pubic hair and armpits and fingernails. He said, make this the day that you do that as a ritual, as a practice. I tell all my students who are khatibs to do this in the mornings. If you have to go to work in the morning and you can't do it, you wake up extra early on Jumu'ah and you make this a habit to do, right? The imam should be the most hygienic on the day of Jumu'ah. The imam should be extra cautious than everyone else, right? Every man who bathes, cleans whatever he can of himself, applies oil or perfume, exits his house, and after entering the masjid does not split two people sitting together, prays whatever is prescribed for him, and remains silent while the imam speaks, all the sins he will commit between this Jummah and the next Jummah will be forgiven. So it is a salvific practice to follow all of these things. This hadith is going to come up. We will take other benefits from it. Number 2, put on some nice clothes and apply perfume. Right? So it's the same exact narration. So I'm not going to repeat the narration. Number 3, proceed to the masjid as early as possible. So on this day of Jummah, angels stand by the masjid doors, writing the names of the first person to enter, then the next, and so on. So there's attendance on the day of Jummah. Okay, and the attendance is based on order. Who came to the Jummah first? All right. This is important. But what you can do is you can go to the masjid early, park really far, and walk to the masjid. So you benefit from the walking aspect of it, and that's what the ulama recommends. Okay, and by the way, it's a good habit because it'll force you to come to the masjid early, right? So you get the other things as well. The next is entering the masjid with the right foot and reciting. You have to recite. Now, can you do that to musallas? Can you do that to prayer spaces? Yes. You can do that to any place which is was not, when populations were higher, were not actually prayed in the masjid as well. The Eid Salah was almost never prayed in the masjid. Right? The sunnah of the Eid Salah is to pray in a maidan, like a field, like a soccer field, something of that nature. Okay? So it's the spacing is what's important, right? So you enter with your right foot, and when you leave the masjid, you leave with your left foot, right? Okay. Sit in the first row behind the prayer leader, the imam, if space is available. If not, sit as close to the front as possible. Right. Procure the nearest available space without walking over people's shoulder. So I've seen this because people are very zealous and they want to get to the first stop or they see opening spot. You're not allowed to make other people's life uncomfortable and difficult because you want to get to a particular spot. So listen to this narration. This is in Abu Dawood. There's also a version of this narration, long version in Muslim as well, that the Prophet ﷺ says, comes to Jumu'ah, does not step over people's necks, prays whatever Allah has decreed for him. Right? That's the sunnah before the Fajr, before the Fajr prayer. So doesn't step over people's necks mean that they're not climbing over people to get to their spot. Right? They're dignified in their approach. We talked about this, that attendance is taken by the angels. Performs 4 rak'ah of sunnah prayer. This is a madhab to madhab issue. So the Hanafis use the hadith of Tirmidhi here to justify 4 rak'ah of sunnah before the prayer, and they also do 4 rak'ah after, right? Based on a different riwayah. So here's an important thing. Make a supplication when the imam briefly sits between the two servants. Right? So this is actually there in the hadith tradition as well, not just a fiqhi sunnah component, but it's embedded in the hadith. Have you heard your father report anything from Allah's Messenger? So Abu Burda, the son of Abu Musa al-Ash'ari, was when he was asked from Ibn Umar, then he said, yes, I heard him say that the Prophet ﷺ said, it is the moment between when the imam sits and when salah is completed. Right? So there's a moment where there is extra, it's a time where the du'as are accepted. Okay? Then perform 4 rak'ah of sunnah prayers after. This is the hadith of Nasa'i. And the icing on the cake of Jummah, the sweetest thing you can do on Jummah is throughout the day, right, is to always remember the Prophet ﷺ and to do salah ala nabi, because the Prophet himself said so. Okay, there's at least 4 different companions who reported the hadith. This one is from Abu Darda. The Prophet ﷺ said, pray for me abundantly on the day of Jummah, for it is witnessed the angels witness it. Whenever anybody prays for me, their prayer is continuously presented to me until it is completed. I asked, even after death? He replied, even after death. Allah has prohibited the earth from consuming the bodies of prophets. Allah's prophet is alive and is being granted provisions. Okay? So what this indicates to is that the Salah ala Nabi is an essential component of Jumu'ah. I asked Sheikh Al-Hilmi, one of my teachers in Arabic, and I asked him, Sheikh, what advice do you have for Khateebs who give Jumu'ah khutbahs? And he plainly said to me, the more Salah ala Nabi they'll do, the Allah will open up their tongue to be very smooth. So he said this is one way that the ulama, he said it's mujarrad, he said try it. He said there's no one I've said this advice to that have done the wird of Allahumma salli ala Muhammad, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad, and different Salah ala Nabi, whatever you can make your own, by the way, right? Yeah, in one of my classes I give students a project, and it's find the most beautiful words you can find to present to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in praise of the Prophet and asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless him. That's your project, it's your homework, assignments, right? So tap into your poetic self, right? Everyone's got a hidden poet inside of you, right? You just, when you fall in love, it comes out. And then 2 years after marriage, it goes somewhere. But there is a poet inside of you. You have to tap into that poet. There's a poet here too, but I'm saying there's actual poets inside of everyone. And you express your adoration for the Prophet ﷺ. Make up your own Salah ala Nabi. I'm not saying don't use Ibn Mas'ud's. Ibn Mas'ud's is beautiful. To use Ibn Mas'ud's that has been narrated, use that. But you should have your own personal Salah that you do for the Prophet ﷺ. It be something between you and Allah. And it's been something that you're very sort of fond of, and it's easy on your lips. Point is, it's mujarrad. There's no one who's ever done this practice and they're not been facilitated in their Jummah. It works, okay? All right. So, a couple of principles before we dig into the second component. This was first component, second component, and then the third component, if we get time, is I'm gonna give you guys a topic, and then we'll have about 7 minutes that you'll have, and you have to prepare a khutbah. Okay? And so impromptu, on the spot, with your phone as your resource. Okay? Because you don't want to make up verses in hand, right? So you can use some tools. But what we'll do is then we'll have some people come up and present, or maybe if we ran out of time, we could do that at a later time. We can just come back one day and we'll just do the workshop, and then some of us who've given khutbahs before, including myself, will just give you some feedback on the spot. That works, okay? This is one of the best ways to get good at public speaking, which is to get critiqued. Public speaking is not a theoretical thing. You know, it's like those guys who watch like every basketball game, and they have the best basketball shorts and shoes, and then when you actually do a basketball with them, you were like, what's happening? It's like, I don't think this is basketball, right? Because it's not, basketball isn't something you learn through theory. Or so all those guys who watch, guys by the way, I mean it, all those guys who watch all these cooking shows, yeah, you watch all these bake-offs and cooking shows and all this stuff, and then it's like, well, when is the last time you made something? Like, I made eggs this morning. It's like, dude, you're watching these shows where people are making these amazing things, but unless you do it and you fail, that's how you get good at cooking. You make stuff and people want to throw up. And that happens for a long time until you get really good at it. And now you can host parties. You can host people, which is, by the way, a very righteous thing to do. To learn how to cook well and to learn to feed people you love. This is one of the highest things you can do of service for others. Right? So something to think about. Okay, so what's the principle? We don't rise to our goals, we fall into our systems, right? We talked about this in the Sheikh and Chai event, for those of you who were there, which means you can't just show up to Jummah as a Khateeb. There's no, I'm going to wing this because I think I'm a good speaker. That's not a thing, okay? This is where the Prophet once stood, metaphorically. Yeah, and you should never feel ready for it. The moment you feel I am the most competent person to give this is where you are absolutely lost. This is not the case. Okay? So you have to build systems. We must establish principles, systems, and protocols for all things important in life. We must do that. We don't have a choice. Anything important to you, you should have a system around it. Because you're going to have weak days. And when we have weak days, you'll abandon the practice. But if you have a system, then it won't let you abandon it because you're part of a system. Mastery is a process and not an event, so don't expect to get good at it right away. So this is the number one advice I can give. So if you forget everything that I've ever said to you, when you prepare your next khutbah, remember this as well. Okay? Don't be provocative. Right? Be thought-provoking. If there's one thing that you get from this whole thing, is that. What do you want? You want after the Jummah khutbah that everyone who's leaving, they're putting their shoes on and they have a moment to think. They're not talking to anyone, they have a moment to think. They should be thinking about something you've said in there. And it should spark an adventure in their mind. It's like, I'm actually going to look that up. That verse sounds really cool. I'm going to figure out what that verse is. I'm going to try and memorize that hadith. That hadith sounds interesting. Right? I'm going to write that down. So right after the khutbah, they're like writing down something. You want to basically send people on a journey of transformation. That's the point of the khutbah. Right? What happens when you're provocative? Then you create people who are trying to criticize you. When you or the people feel too ashamed or they feel too down to be contemplative. You've removed contemplation and pondering from their mindset because you just yelled at them. You're like, you guys do this and do that, and everyone feels like, my God, they feel like they just got hit with a train, right? They don't feel any spirituality. They just feel guilt, right? And do you really want? Is that how people learn? Even if you have a child, you guys don't have children. I mean, I don't know. Maybe I don't know if you have children or not. Okay, assuming you have children, but I have a 4-year-old and she's experimental, to say the least. Okay, and she always pushes boundaries because she wants to know what she can get away with. And at times, as a parent, you have to set boundaries. You have to set adab boundaries. You have to set sacred boundaries. You have to set discipline boundaries, routine boundaries. And you have two options as a parent. You could be provocative, or you could be thought-provoking. You can ask a question to get her to contemplate on something, or you could just yell. Right? And yelling type of parenting never actually works. It doesn't. Statistically speaking, it doesn't. Right? If you think I'm making this up, read every book on parenting that's done by sane people, because there are insane people writing books on parenting that aren't scholars. But if you read that, it's the same stuff. So we're done part A. Now we get to actual khutbah stuff. If you have any questions on stuff we've covered, we're 10 minutes over time. So quick questions only, right? Rapid fire. Yes, sir.
What if they're
Yeah.
Yes. What if they're yelling in a way that's thought-provoking?
That's what?
That's thought-provoking.
He's planning something crazy.
Look, let's look at some of the principles of eloquence, and we'll realize that do you really need to shout? By the way, by yelling, I don't mean raise your voice. The Prophet used to raise his voice in Jumu'ah. Okay? You've heard me so many times, at times I raise my voice. This is something prophetic. By yelling, I don't mean raising your voice. By yelling, I mean shouting at people. It's like, this generation, you guys did this, or this is, what is wrong with you? Aren't you, that's yelling. Raising your voice to try and make a point sit and glue to someone's heart, that's a prophetic tool of rhetoric. That's not the problem, right? So as long as you are, you're raising your voice is part of eloquence sometimes, right? Giving long pauses is part of eloquence. Sometimes if you think you've said something that you want someone to think about, right? It's okay to say something like, hey, don't be provocative, be thought-provoking. And give a 4 or 5 second pause before you continue. It's completely fine. It's actually part of eloquence to be quiet. It's part of eloquence to be loud. It's part of eloquence to slow down sometimes. Or to say things like, okay, I want everyone to focus. And then to actually speak softer so that people who are far or close, they have to pay extra attention. So these are all like techniques. The Prophet used a lot of these techniques. There's nothing wrong with this. Okay, any other questions? Yes, your name? Shahriar, what's up?
So you mentioned that as a leader, and especially like in these positions, it's ideal that a person is in a situation where they don't want to be put into leadership positions, the community pushes them.
Yeah.
And you also mentioned that when you feel that you're ready to give a khutbah, you feel confident, you look at yourself in that manner,
Yeah.
you've lost. You're like
Yes.
lost. So where would you draw the line between keeping all these things in check and feeling confident? Because confidence is, I think, a key part of public speaking, right? Where
Yes.
do you draw the line?
Yeah, so I think confidence and humility can coexist, right? And they must coexist. Confidence is the ability to carry out your task without hesitation because of your level of mastery over the content and your passion towards the thing that you're speaking about. That's what adds confidence. So I know what I'm talking about, I know the verses, I know the narrations, I know the commentaries, I know the issue well, to some degree. You know, well in the sense like you're not the most knowledgeable, that's not expected. But you know that well, and at the same time, I'm really passionate about this. Like I'm not just saying this for the sake of saying it, I actually believe in it. If you have that, you have confidence. Humility is that you know that this is where he sallallahu alaihi wasallam once stood, and you know who you are compared to him. And the moment you do that comparison, then you know what the reality is. And both things can coexist in the same heart. And they better coexist in the same heart. You don't want people going on the mimbar that are lacking confidence. Because if they're lacking confidence, then they're not going to be able to do tabligh of what is it they're trying to say fully. Something is going to get lost in translation, right? That's a really good question. Okay, yes, your
What did
name?
that hadith,
Rehan?
what did the hadith mean about not splitting up 10 people sitting together?
Yeah, it's like,
Oh, okay.
like you move two people, like they're sitting and you're like I'm sitting here now, right? Yeah, I am the captain now. Yes.
So, one more aspect that I believe,
Oh, sorry, I'm just gonna
I-
hustle. Sorry, your name?
Mustafa.
Okay. Yes.
One
yeah.
more aspect is actually knowing what you're talking about in depth, especially when you don't have a paper or when you're just looking at bullet points. How important is to know the full extent of what you're saying and how can I prepare for this? What's the best way to prepare?
We're going to come to that. One of the things is that if you're going to be a khateeb, you have to be engaged in ilm. So you have to have teachers, you have to have asatidha, you have to have fellow classmates that you're discussing knowledge with. The things that you're going to talk about in the khutbah, you should have at least discussed it with the sheikh, your teacher, or a senior student, right? It is good to do a dry run. You don't have to give the whole khutbah. You say, I'm going to talk about these three things. And what do you think about this? Is this something, am I missing something, or am I misunderstanding something? It's good to do that, right? It happens. On Wednesday, Thursday, a lot of students, people in the community, they'll send us stuff. Myself, Ustadh Halim, Daniel, like, this Friday I'm talking about this khutbah. Can you quickly check if this is all kosher? Right? Okay, so let's go to this step, right? So power of language and good speech. So don't expect that if you are someone who is sincere and you're vulgar for 6 years, that the khutbah is going to be Christian and final, right? Don't. Okay, so don't make that assumption. What do I mean by that? What I mean by that is that if you want the proper diction to come out on Friday, if you want to speak with honor, if you want to speak with nobility, if you want to use the right words for the right thing, and you want to be able to make an impact on someone, that is not something you do on Friday and you turn it off for all the 6 days. You don't get into a khutbah mode. It's like, I'm going to wear this hat and I'm transformed into the khatib, right? This is not a thing, okay? It'd be pretty cool if someone invented that, by the way. But that's not a thing, okay? What I mean by that is that your being able to deliver that amazing khutbah actually comes from you engaging with that content, you talking about that content, and you living in the world of that content for the whole week. So you should know on Saturday what your khutbah is going to be for next Friday. And you discuss that with people, and you look at the narrations, and you look at the verses, and you listen to things, and you read things on that topic, and you're very comfortable with the words that are involved in that discussion, and you're basically you've created a mini idea world, and the idea world is to deal with that topic on Friday, right? And so the whole week you are doing tawaf of that idea. So by the time Friday comes, everything that you're saying is coming out as if you've been saying this all the time, because you have. You have been saying it all the time. You've been thinking about it. You've been writing notes on it. You've been discussing it. You know, people always ask me, how am I able to give so much sort of talks and things like that, and I don't write anything? I'm like, please visit my desk, right? I write everything, right? You should see my notes from my teachers now, even if they're teaching something very basic. My principle is to rewrite things even if I have it written elsewhere. I write everything. You know, people accuse me that I don't write stuff and I just present. I don't have any sheets in front of me. How am I doing this? Like, you have no idea. I write 50 times more than you write. All right? This is why I could do this, because I've been writing all this stuff down so many times. Everything that I'm telling you, most likely, as a principle or as something that you see on the screen, there's loads of notes on it. And I can even find you these notes. You know, recently I moved, and so some of my students were helping me move. And so they were picking boxes, and all the boxes were like, you know, box number 83, box number 112, box number 154. It's like these moving boxes, they're all numbered. They're all books, right? And then they were like, how come these books are so light compared to those books? I'm like, because they're not actual books, they're my notes. And it's like 20, 30 boxes, just notes. Right? They're saying, how did you write all this stuff? It's like, because that's what you do as a student. You just write. Because you don't know what to say. You don't know anything. You just have to write, because that's a phase. There's a phase where you just have to absorb. And so no one sees that phase, right? You see someone, like when you see athletes who do these amazing stunts in front of the camera that make it to the highlight reel, you're like, oh, look at this person. He's so amazing. No one saw 10 years ago when they were struggling with everything. No one sees that, right? So as a person who's going to take speaking seriously, remember that it starts not the Thursday. The prep for the Friday khutbah doesn't start Thursday. It doesn't Thursday night or Wednesday night. It starts Saturday. You have to give yourself at least 6 days to create a world in which the idea, the topic of your khutbah is something that you're going to do tawaf over, that you're obsessed with it. Okay? And how do you start? You start with the Quran. What does the Quran tell us about proper language? Every single khatib on all Jum'ahs starts with this, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, قُولُوا قَوْلًا سَدِيدًا. Fix your language. Make sure that you speak an upright, straight word. And if you do that, يُصْلِحْ لَكُمْ أَعْمَالَكُمْ وَيَغْفِرْ لَكُمْ ذُنُوبَكُمْ. Right? So the Quran is telling us to fix our language. It says, إِنَّ أَنْكَرَ الْأَصْوَاتِ لَصَوْتُ الْحَمِيرِ. The Quran tells us that the most detestable sound or noise to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the braying of the donkey, which means you say things that don't mean anything. You say things in a way that are vulgar and boisterous. That's how the commentators explain it. What does that mean? That means throughout the rest of the week, you will carry yourself with nobility in your speech. You're very noble in your speech. That helps you with the khutbah. There's a riwayah, it has weakness in it, but the Prophet said, "Ana afsahun nas." I am the most eloquent of mankind, meaning I'm very precise with my words. I'm very beautiful in my speech. Right? The Sahaba in the Shama'il literature, they say, Imam Tirmidhi has it in his Shama'il, other ulama have it in their Shama'il too, where Sayyidina Ali says that we've never met anyone more eloquent than the Prophet ﷺ. Right? Afsaha minna lisanan, that he is the most eloquent in terms of his speech, in terms of all Arabs. Right? There is a direct link between language and intellect. So a famous diction study says that kids' IQs are predictable by the age of 4, which is, by the way, a super scary idea. Right? IQ studies are shoddy, I understand that, but IQ is a very strong predictor of a lot of things. And the studies on IQ have been being conducted for over 8 decades now, right? Informally. And formally over at least 3-4 decades with a lot of precision. We know for a fact, for example, that children who have an active vocabulary at the age of 4 of over 500 words have a much stronger IQ at the age of 15 and 16 than their counterparts who had half that vocab. Which means, you know, the stupidest thing to do when you have kids around, I know you're not parents yet, but something to keep in mind is to come to a baby and say, oh, we're googly googly, right? You know, people do all this stuff, right? Boo boo, like this stuff is the stupidest thing to do, right? It's the worst thing you can do to a child. What you can do to a child is you actually speak to them and you teach them words. My daughter, she's 4 years old. She's a manipulator. She didn't get that from me. And what she does is that, we do this exercise where she says something to me in regular speech, and I have to say that to her in more eloquent speech, and she has to say it back to me, right? So if I ask her, we go on a walk every day. I come home, we go on a walk to check the mail, and so in that walk, I'll ask her, "So what did you do today?" And she'll say something like, "I finished my writing book," or "I played this," or "I did this," or "I went with Dada to this thing," right, with her grandfather to this thing. Okay, she'll say something, and I'll say the same thing, but it would be slightly different. So so she says, "I played for 2 hours." And I say, "You mean you engaged with your toys for 2 hours? Can you say that back?" So she'll say, "I engaged with my toys for 2 hours." She'll repeat that 3 times, right? So she's picked that up. Now, what happens is that you start noticing things. She's able to compute things that her cousins and other, like our family friends who are 4 years old, can't compute. And she sounds like she's talking like an adult. And so they make fun of her because they say, she's saying stuff that adults say, without realizing that that's the point. That's the whole point, because speech is directly connected to your IQ. One of the things that Allah says in the Quran to distinguish us from other creatures and to give us this fadl is that when he's talking about his greatest gifts to humanity, where he calls himself Ar-Rahman, he starts listing out. He says, "Allama al-Quran, khalaqa al-insana." We would all agree that the Quran is an immense blessing of Allah to us. We'll all agree that existence, like we could been atoms on a table. We could have been that. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose for us to be human beings. That's a great blessing of Allah. In the same lieu, he says, وَعَلَّمْهُ الْبَيَانِ. He taught them speech. Right? In the same lieu. It's like there's not a different section of the Quran. Like Quran, existence, speech. Right? And this is something that we should take very seriously. Therefore, even when you're with your friends, when with your family, choose your words carefully. Weigh your words. You have no idea the type of honor that comes from just speaking the right thing at the right time and to the right person. Right? So just quickly, what does the word grammar mean? The word grammar comes from the exact same Germanic word as glamour. And if you trace it back, it's actually the same word, right? It comes from grammatikos, from Germanic. And it means that which gives dazzlement. This is why today we use the word glamour in that meaning. Oh, this person is glamorous, which means I can't take my eyes off them. That's why they use it for all the celebrities on the red carpet. You wore a glamorous dress, meaning the reporters couldn't take their eyes off it. It's to put magic on someone's eyes. That's the idea, right? The English word we use for getting a word right in its sequence, like C-A-T, cat. I've just spelt it. Spelling, that's a magical term. We use it for magic. This person cast a spell on someone, right? So right usage, this is what the Prophet said, that inna min al-bayani la sihrun, that indeed in some speech there's magic. You can be in a room, and by the way, you could use this for evil. Hitler is a good example of this, right? People come in the speech hating the guy, right? Hating the guy. And he would speak for them for like, his speeches are notoriously known for, by the way, being 4 to 5 hours long, right? But he had this power of eloquence, and people will go willing to die for the guy. They came in hating him, and they would report that one speech changed everything. So this is a magical tool, right? And that's why Winston Churchill, not a big fan, but he said that orators, people who give talks and speeches, and people who are mighty eloquent, they have a power that is more forceful than sovereign kings. Because for a sovereign king to get people to fall in line, they have to legislate laws or bring in the army. But for an orator to get people to do what they want, all they have to do is move some skeletal muscles in their jaw, and people will fall in line, right? Yeah, the word language arts or liberal arts The root word on liberal is liberos, which means to free something. And the word art, you see the AR root letter there? It has to do with that which can be used as a tool of power. So the liberal arts are the tools you learn to free your mind from the shackles of mediocrity, from the shackles of ignorance. That's what the liberal arts are supposed to be. In the Arabic language, what is the word for a sentence? Jumla. And what are the root letters of jumla? Jim, mim, and lam, which is where you get the word beauty from, jamil, right? Or jamal, right? You know what that means? That means the whole point of a sentence is supposed to add beauty. The point of a sentence is supposed to add beauty to whatever's happening, right? So, speech principle number 1, silence is golden and speech is detrimental, which means if there's any fluff in your khutbah, you remove it. Okay, you remove it. If there's anything you're saying for the sake of saying it, because, well, I don't think this is going to be 20 minutes, so let me just add, you know what we do with our essays? You know, the word count, to get to the right word count, just add a bunch of fluff. Yeah, so you don't do that with speech. So if your khutbah is going to, you only prep for 7 minutes, it's better to do the 7 minutes and repeat it. Like 7 minutes of actual content, just repeat the 7 minutes. I guarantee you most people won't notice. I've done this like hundreds of times. Yeah? Let's say you only prepped your khutbah is 7 minutes, and beyond that, if you want to make it like a 15-20 minute khutbah, like your regular, there's going to be a lot of fluff. So what do? You do the 7 minute khutbah that you're good at, that you've practiced, and then you do the same thing in different words. So now it becomes 14 minutes. You could do it as same thing. This is way better than blabbering on things you haven't practiced, or I'm just going to let my mind wander into whatever comes. No, whatever is coming next is not a good thing. Right? Because you don't even know what's coming next, all right? So this is not, you don't wing khutbahs, okay? So silence is golden, speech is detrimental. If you have a choice and you're running out of time, repeat things that you've already said. There's no harm in that, right? A reminder benefits the believer, okay? So the Prophet said, Man samata najah, right? The spellings are off on this. This is not by me, by the way. I gave this talk, someone did the notes. I copy pasted, right? That's why the slides look like this. These are not my slides. My slides look like this, you guys. Just to let you know, the previous one, these were my slides, okay? So this is what I did, and these are from a student, okay? So there's going to be a lot of spelling mistakes here because I noticed some. Okay, the next is the Prophet ﷺ said that man kana yu'minu billahi wal yawmil akhir falyaqul khayr aw liyasmut. Whoever believes in Allah in the last day, let them be quiet, let them speak that which is good or remain quiet. Right? Again, I'm trying to warn you against frivolous, futile, fluff speech. Right? The rule for a reflective and pure life is limited speech, limited food, limited sleep. My personal anecdote here, don't eat anything before Jumu'ah. If you're a khatib, don't eat a big breakfast, or just water is fine. I've practiced this for over 10 years now. I don't eat anything before Jumu'ah. Okay? Which kind of sucks for days like this, because then even after Jumu'ah, you don't have anything to eat. But the general rule is you want to be on a light stomach. You want to be on an empty stomach. You want to make sure that you are able to give everything of yourself to the khutbah, and your body is not sort of busy with other occupations. The Prophet ﷺ also said that there's from the slaves of my slaves, they will say something without thinking it's a big deal, but not realizing that it will throw them in the fire of hell. And there's other slaves who will say something not thinking it's a big deal, but it was pleasing to Allah, and they'll be given Jannah because of it. What that means is that hell and heaven is on the line based on our speech. So to be extra cautious with speech is just generally a good thing to do. We're going to skip through some of this stuff. Al-Mutanabbi said that I wish my neck was a mile long, so that if I utter something that I have a long time to stop from that thing from leaving, because I'll close my lips, because people usually say things they regret. How many times has that happened to people who are giving Jummah khutbahs, I should have said that, not like this. I didn't mean that, but then you can't really fix yourself in the khutbah. It just doesn't work. But sometimes you're trying to say something else comes out, or you make a big mistake. right? Teeth as being cages, right? So Al-Asfahi, he said that your teeth are the natural cages to your tongue, as if the tongue is some prisoner who has to be behind bars. Because if you let it loose, then it's going to create havoc. This is why the Prophet ﷺ said that whoever can guarantee me what's between their jaws, then I can guarantee them Jannah, right? So things are like that are really important. Mouth is generally problematic. What goes in allows shaitan to flow through you if you're not careful. What goes out can lead to Jahannam if not careful, right? So just that mouth cavity is one of the most careful cavities. If you put haram in, you're in trouble. And if haram comes out, you're in trouble. So you have to be extra cautious with what you eat, what you consume, and what you produce, right? What's the exception? Exception to, so the rule is don't speak. Like rule in life, not just for khutbahs. Rule in life, don't speak. What's the exception? Silence can be cowardice and weakness of faith. So when you're a coward and you're not speaking, and that's the reason, that's a weakness, right? Because the Prophet said, "Man ra'a minkum munkar falyughayyirhu biyadihi." If anyone sees anything evil, change it with their hands. You can't, you don't have the power to, but you have influence, then speak against it, right? And if you don't even have influence to speak against it, then remain quiet. But the point is that it's a sign of faith to speak up. Also, the Quran says, "Qul ja'a al-haqqu wa zahaqa al-batil." Right? When truth comes, falsehood is obliterated. And what does that mean? That means where's truth? Point to truth. The Quran is saying truth comes and falsehood is obliterated. You guys show me where truth is. Where is it in this room? Where is it? Is there anyone named Haqq? No. Where is truth? There's no truth. Right? Oh, there is. Okay. But yeah, the Quran's not talking about you, man. Right? But where's truth? No, it's actually the people of truth. When the people of truth come, when people representing the Quran come, when people representing the Sunnah come, then batil is obliterated. Right? That's what it means. So people are the vessels of the truth. So speaking, if for the sake of truth, is for the sake of platforming the right thing, then it's actually a good thing. And that's what the khutbah is. What is the khutbah if not a representation of ja al-haqq wa zahaq al-batil? That's what it is. So the khutbah is something that we should be vocal about and speak in. Okay? Okay. Principle number 2, don't seek positions of grandeur, right? Which is, you don't want to be in the limelight. That's not what people should be seeking, right? That someone, it's not your MSA. It is your MSA. Okay? It is your MSA. So they messaged me once. I'm not going to mention who. Messaged me once. It's not Uzair. Okay? It's absolutely not Uzair. But they messaged me once and they said, "Ustadh, I get some bad news." I was like, "What happened?" And now I'm getting serious. Like, what's going on? So, well, it's the summer term khutbah for you, which means that you're not going to have a lot of people today at the thing. I'm like waiting for the bad news. I'm like, so what's happening? Like, do we not get a place? Do we have to do it outside? Like, what's happening? He's like, no, I just wanted you to know that there's not going to be a lot of people. I'm like, that's not bad news. Like, that doesn't mean anything, right? Yeah, there's less people to be responsible for. That's good news. But yeah, the number of people behind you, irrelevant. There's a lot of things. Is it being recorded or not? Is it going to be on YouTube? Because then I'll do it, right? But there's interesting things that happen. Very interesting things that happen because people don't understand the spiritual aspect of what it means to be of service to the community, right? So second is, it's a tough job representing perfection, and we're representing the Prophet ﷺ. So always remember that. You're representing perfection, which means you're always going to falter. Ibn Attallah said, "Idfan wujudak fi ardil khumul." He said that bury your essence, your ego, into the soil of obscurity, of nothingness. Because when do things flourish? They flourish when they're buried. Right? So you want to flourish as a human being? Bury yourself in the earth of obscurity. You don't want people following and being influenced by you. And if you focus on your nafs and you do that for a while, then maybe one day you are worthy that you turn into a tree and people can pluck its fruits. Right? So you have to keep that. And that's why Shah Wali al-Dahlawi said something really cool. He said, look, if you have an arrogant person, right, they're like a tree that has no leaves and no fruits. because that type of tree stands erect. It stands, very straight. But if you have a tree that has a lot of fruits, the more fruit it has, the lower its branches are. It's very humble. So how do you know someone who's really knowledgeable? And how do you know that they have a lot of fruit to give? You can basically talk to them about anything. They're regular people. They're down to earth people. One of the things of the Prophet that he's known for is that if you actually walked into Medina and you saw the Prophet amongst the Sahaba, you wouldn't know he wasn't wearing special clothes. He wasn't sitting at a higher platform than everybody else. He didn't have some crown over his head. He didn't have anything that you wouldn't know. If you didn't know, you wouldn't know. You would only know because you'll see everyone else revering this man. You're like, oh, he's the messenger of Allah. Not from his outfit, not from his accessories, none of that stuff. Okay? What's the exception? Seeking out a position when you have the prerequisites and it would benefit others. Like Yusuf alayhi salam asking to be put ala khaza'in al-ard, to be put as the treasurer, because Yusuf alayhi salam is basically primed for this position. Because he grew up in the palace, he knows all the corruption of Egypt. Because he grew up with the Aziz, right? And then he was in prison, so he knows like what happens to people who are corrupt and how their mind works. Because he was in prison with them. And now Egypt is going to be very wealthy and rich because they're going to have a solution to a global problem or to a regional problem. They have the solution because of the dream of the king, right? So he's like, this can go really bad if someone else is in charge, because I actually know the ministers and I know the people who are going to cause corruption. Because I lived in the palace and I lived in the prison. So I'm the guy for this, right? So it's a different case. Yusuf alayhi salam asked, so prerequisite for public speaking are what? Sincerity to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is an intention game. Every time I drive to any khutbah that I've ever given, the first thing you have to remind yourself again and again is if there's even one person there or two people, whatever your madhab says is a minimum for Jummah, that I will give the exact same khutbah as if there was 500 people there, because this is not for people. The khutbah is for me. I'm going there to give myself a reminder. And I'm weak at this thing, that's why I chose this topic. I'm neglectful of this topic, that's why I chose this topic. This khutbah is for me. Everyone else is extra, right? So if they were there or not there, it wouldn't change the way that I would conduct this, right? So sincerity is number one. Private worship should reign supreme over public discourse. This is not just for khutbah. This is when you start giving classes, when you start getting students, when people start asking you Islamic things, questions and whatnot. You should know your private worship now has to go up. Your private worship, when you come in the limelight and people can see your knowledge, people can see what you do, this is now double the work for you now. Because you better now do more worship in private to prove to your nafs you're not doing it because people are interested in listening to you. Which means that, you're like those grandmother figures at home who are paying like tahajjud every night. You're like 2 juz of Quran after the Dhuhr, like those weirdos. Yeah, you have to be that weirdo. Because if in the public eye, everyone sees you as someone who's doing all this khair, yeah, your nafs can get used to that. It can get used to the eyes of other human beings instead of the attention of Allah. And so how do you discipline your nafs to want the attention of Allah, to prove your nafs that you're not doing this for other people? And that only happens through private devotion. Sincerity to others. So genuine concern, right? Make dua for others and genuinely want them to go to Jannah. So when you come to the khutbah, you look at everyone here as someone who, because of this khutbah is going to do great things. Don't look at it as that I am better, that's why I'm here, and everyone else needs help. And I'm here to give the help. Like as if you're the doctor, everyone's the patient. And you're there, and without you, how will they get healed? Right? To have that savior complex or the Messiah complex. Like, no, that's not it. You're here because it's circumstance. If they had some circumstances, they'd be here, you'd be in their spot. This is all circumstance. It's not because of any fadila that you have. It's just circumstance. Allah blessed you with some teachers. That's what happened. If Allah blessed them with their with your teachers, maybe they would have been better than you. You don't know that, right? In-depth knowledge of the subject at hand, right? So in that topic, that mini topic, on that day, you should feel like you're the mujtahid. You're not. But you should feel as if like, I know this, I've read this was available in the language that I'm comfortable with, I understood it, I discussed it with 2 teachers, I discussed it with this seniors, I know this stuff. I know this in and out, I've looked at this, right? So to have that adds confidence. That was Shariar's question as well. So clarity in speech, make sure that you're not like double speaking. right? Because you're not sure yourself, so you're like, this is good, and this is also good, and some scholars said this is good too, right? And it's like, and then everyone, like most people in the audience sitting like, okay, what do I have to actually do? The guy said like 3 things are fine, and 2 of them oppose the other, right? So you have to be clear in your speech. So discernment of the audience. So at Jumu'ah, you know that you don't have a confrontational audience. No one's trying to pick faults in you, although some people actually like that. Like they literally come at the Jumu'ah and they're looking for you to make a mistake. And you will see these uncles. You will learn them, you will know them very well. Okay? And they are looking for you to falter. And sometimes when you don't falter, you can tell they're angry. Right after they're like, what do I stop him for, right? But there are people like that. There's nothing you can do. You just smile, nod, and you hug them, and then you leave. Okay, they're just there to keep you humble. Okay, because they'll say things like, I think you quoted this wrong, or you didn't mention the source here, or this happened, or that happened. You always have this, especially in the masjid. MSA, I don't think you'll have a lot of, but at the masjid, you always have this guy. He's there. He's been doing this to everyone. Okay, he'll do it to the official imam of the masjid too. It's not because you're young he's doing it. He'll do it to everybody, right? So that's one person. The second person is someone who will give you a lot of praise. That guy's dangerous. The uncles still keep you humble, right? The people who come after and they say, "Ya Sheikh," and you're like, you're 18, right? You're like first year kid. It's like, Sheikh, right? 19. This guy's calling you Sheikh. He's like trying to kiss your hand, because of a Jumu'ah khutbah, and you're like, I made like 16 mistakes in there, right? So you have this person as well who will put you at the maqam of like Shaykhul Islam because of a Jumu'ah khutbah, okay? And so what do? That person is dangerous for your ego, okay? Immediately you say that هذا من فضل ربك. This is from Allah, right? You don't say, Jazakallah khair. It's a really good khutbah, inshallah. I didn't even get a lot of time to practice actually, so kind of winged the last part, but I'm so glad you liked it. Thank you. Right? No, you don't do that. You do the exact opposite. You say, Allah blessed me with great teachers. I'm still struggling. Please make dua for me that Allah makes this better. Right? So you turn it completely over and you say, like, what was this? Like, what are you talking? I think you might be a little deaf. Right? Don't be offensive. Don't be offensive. But the idea is to never accept that as reality. Someone's praising you, like, this is not your friend. Right? They just don't know that. And that's why ulama never praise people like this. They don't. Right? They just don't. I'm seriously telling you. If they want to praise you, they'll do it not at that time. They'll do it much after so it doesn't inflate your ego. I've seen this. Even my own teacher, when he wants, my teacher, Shaykhana Shaykh Omar, I love this guy. Make dua for him. He's actually really, really sick right now. He wanted to praise me about something, right? I wrote. He asked me to write a refutation of something, so I wrote it. I submitted it, and I think he didn't say a word about it. 2 years later, on my nikah day, he did my nikah, right? In my nikah sermon, he talked about the paper that I wrote, and he said at that time I knew that his mind is made for ilm. And I'm like, oh, he could have told me. You have 2 years. It would have motivated me so much. But these guys know, like the actual ulama don't praise you like this. They don't. They look for times when it's appropriate, when they know it's not going to inflate your ego, and then they'll let you know that you're on the right track. So all those guys that come to you right after the khutbah say, this was the best thing I've ever heard, right? Like, think about this for a second. They are being naive. You shouldn't let your ego be naive and believe them. Don't believe them. That's not true. You know objectively that that's not true, right? So that's important. Okay, so guidelines for the Jummah khutbah. Watch out for your intentions. Keep renewing your intention in your heart and on your tongue. Praise Allah for making you worthy of being an imam. Know that it's a responsibility. Ask Allah to make sure you're not a fitna towards others, that you're not there to cause chaos. You're there to cause reform and order. Be of the best character. This is so important, right? When Allah has orchestrated the world in which you are going to be at the pulpit, you're going to be the leader, then make sure you adopt as much of prophetic character as possible, right? In terms of the way you speak to people, the way you sit, the way you stand, the way you walk, the way you use your words, the way you smile at other people. Just make sure that you're extra cautious because people are going to be affected not by your words only, but by your character. And if your character is prophetic, now your words are going to make an actual impact. Right? But if your character is not prophetic, your words are not going to fall on fertile hearts. Right? Make sure the topic applies to all people and not to a small minority. Right? So this happens many a times. Because guys are giving the khutbahs, they'll talk about like stuff that only applies to guys. And like they realize like 20-30% of the people in the musalla, in the masjid, are women. And they're like, I don't know what to do with this information, right? Because it's so masculine specific things, right? So be very cognizant. Sometimes it's age. So it'd be weird in a Jummah khutbah at a university to speak about things that don't apply to this age group. That'd be irrelevant. Imagine someone gave a whole talk on parenting, which would be fine if you were motivating people to get their life in order and get married and have children. That's a different topic. That's a great topic, by the way, to have at a Jummah khutbah at a university. The virtues of parenting and why it's so important to get your life together as quickly as possible. So when you are young enough, you can be with your children and you can show them how to live in this world. That's a different topic. But yeah, next month, done. But to have an entire khutbah on if your kids come to you and say this, or how do you save the iman of your child who's like 6 years old, like it's not relevant to the university audience, right? So make sure that you are keeping that in mind. Do not speak about sect-based stuff. You guys, in your community, right? The people who are coming to Jumu'ah, who actually know the ikhtilafat on the different manahij are like 5%, 10% maximum, right? The rest of the people can't even tell you what like half of those things even mean. To do an entire khutbah on occasionalism, right? That the idea that Allah is destroying the world and creating the world immediately, simultaneously, to do a whole khutbah on that and to say, this is my shuyukh of my ilk, this is their conclusion based on this book and this paragraph, and like 90% of the people sitting there are checking the time. So I think I would prefer class over this. I'd rather be in chemistry than listening to this because they don't understand any of what you're saying, right? So keep that stuff out. Do not speak of politics from the prophetic pulpit. Okay, because look, there's politics which is for advocacy, and there's politics which is for awareness. Politics which is for awareness, like something's happening in the Muslim Ummah, you want everyone to be aware of it. You want everyone to be able to think about it. That's good. That's being relevant. That's being plugged into the zeitgeist. But politics in the sense that elections are coming up, you guys, and I want to use the Jummah khutbah to talk about your local candidate from Ward 32, such and such. This is not what the Jummah khutbah is for Canadian politics, right? For American politics, to discuss the last presidential debate between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. Like, that's not what it's for, right? So political awareness, yes. Tell people that, our new educational minister has changed this policy. This is how it's going to affect the next generation. What are you going to do about this? This is something that's important. That's a different issue because it's about awareness. It's about knowledge. It's not about activism. You don't do any activism from the prophetic minbar, okay? Do not copy someone else's speech. Does anyone know why? Isn't this a good thing? Just copy someone else's speech. So you heard a speech, it was great, copy it. Why is this a problem? Why is that a not? Partly, yes. It's not your speech. What you can do is you can copy someone's speech because you were affected by it, and then you make it your own. Make sure you make it your own, okay? Because then you are passionate about it, right? Then it's your speech. It's not someone else's speech. You're not disconnected from it. You are the source of it. Be the masdar of every speech you give, okay? Focus on social welfare and issues that benefit and harm society. Why? Because what did I tell you? The minbar is for reform. Look at the khutbahs of Abu Bakr, Omar, Uthman, Ali. They're talking about social problems. Like Sayyidina Umar famously in the khutbah, right? That is in Muslim. What does he do? He says, you women of Medina are charging too much for the mahr, right? Because all the guys are coming to him and complaining about this. So he's like, you know what? I'm going to address it. Where does he address it? Where, like, does he call a meeting? Like, we're going to call a city council meeting of Medina. Is that what he did? No, that's what he did at the khutbah. The khutbah is supposed to be for social reform and reminders that benefit the community. That's the whole point. Like, to say things like, You know, we're noticing in campus something this term that we haven't noticed before. This new sort of evil has erupted amongst many of our youth, and I want to address this. This is good. This is the topic of the khutbah, right? Don't try to be controversial so that a drama is created. This is very tempting. It's very tempting to be controversial, because then it's a nice discussion after the khutbah you can have with like a small group of people in a corner, right? But this is not what the khutbah is for, because controversy is drama. The khutbah is supposed to be for dhikr, not drama, right? It's supposed to connect people to Allah, not connect people to some weird ideology, some ism that you are trying to discuss, right? Do not pick on the community or yell at the audience. We talked about that at the beginning, right? Don't say you did this. No, we have a concern that we need to address. And if you need to yell at someone, yell at yourself, right? And that's why it's good to say at the beginning of khutbah that this reminder is specifically for me and as an extension to everybody else, just so that you don't make people think that you're trying to attack them, right? Don't try to prepare a long speech. Don't do that, right? There's a particular time. Your organizers will tell you at what time you need to end. You can't keep the people hostage, because at that time, no one can do anything, right? If someone wanted, technically speaking, they could just keep going. What is someone going to do? You know how awkward it is to get to like, well, all the organizers will do is like, come on, right? They can't do much. Or you could just keep going. It's like, oh, I'm doing this. If that khutbah was horrible, this is the last time I'm going to make the best of it, right? No, you can't just keep all these people hostage, okay? Because this is not your time. If people think the khutbah is like their time, no, it's people's time. You have to honor their time, right? Yes, sir. Yes. You're going to go tell the imam at your local masjid. It's like, don't prolong. Yeah, no, this is a problem. It shouldn't happen in the masjids. It shouldn't happen. Oh, I'll give you an example. There was a Friday which was off. It was Good Friday this year. I was off from khutbah duties. So when I'm off from khutbah duties, I go with my family, wherever they go. And they go to interesting places. And so I'm not going to name the masjid, because the moment I name the masjid, you'll know which imam I'm talking about. So I went with my father-in-law to this masjid. This is this year on Good Friday. And everyone's off Good Friday, generally speaking. The imam gave an hour and 30-minute long khutbah. And he said that I know people are off today. So you know what? There's no better place to be than a masjid. Yeah. How dare they give you off? No, but tell me something. My wife brought, at that time, my 3-year-old daughter to the masjid, because it was the day off and she got to pray with daddy, because I never go to the masjid with her because I'm with you guys or other campuses. And my grandfather, who had just had a surgery, was there, and this was his first time in the masjid. He prays most of his prayers at the masjid. This was his first prayer in the masjid after 3 months of recovery. Right? And he asked me, my father-in-law, he's like, in your opinion, is this valid? I said, yeah, I mean, the salah is valid, but this is wrong at so many levels. This is wrong. There was not a single person who was exiting that masjid, a big masjid in Saga, by the way, who was okay. Were you in the same masjid? Okay. He's like, okay, sorry, this happened with me. I was there. So yeah, this happened at Eid khutbahs, Jummahs. This is very common, unfortunately, right? Memorize your speech. That doesn't mean you can't use visual aid, okay? It doesn't mean that. But what you want is, and my time is up, I know, but I need to, this is important. What you want is something called ordered chaos. So what is ordered chaos? Ordered chaos, all comedians do this. Stand-up comedians, this is why they're so good. Have you noticed that stand-up comedians don't make mistakes? Like news reporters make mistakes, you guys, and they're reading off a teleprompter. Like there's all these bloopers, right? I'm sure you've seen it, of news reporters like mispronouncing things and forgetting things, and like having these blooper moments. But have you ever seen an actual professional stand-up comedian? Whether you went to some live, there's a lot, mashallah, Muslim comedians now who keep things very halal. But even those guys, they don't make mistakes. They don't. You know why? Because in the industry is well known. What you do is you will practice, let's say 100 jokes, and you know them in and out, as if someone was to wake you up at 3 a.m. and say joke number 27, you'd be able to deliver it with perfection, with proper inflection and everything. Exactly, you know the punchlines, you know how to wait, you've practiced the whole thing. Out of those 100, they tell about 12 to 15. And how do they decide which one? Who the audience is, how things are going. That is what's called ordered chaos. That's why they don't have to write anything. They have everything memorized, but they don't know what's going to happen next. It all depends on how they're feeling, right? How the audience is, how people are responding. When you get to a point and you can do that, and you can't do that in the early stages of like public speaking, but if you keep at it, I guarantee you'll come to a point where you don't need the slides, you don't need anything, because you have like so many things memorized in your head, and you can make connections here. Have anyone listened to Sheikh Suleiman Mullah, the South African scholar? Right, he's a good example of this. So Sheikh Suleiman Mullah, I studied Surah Yusuf with him. Okay, bad idea, because you can't take notes with him. And he, by the way, I told him this, Sheikh. I lived with him for a week in a cottage, and I said, Sheikh, can I tell you something? You can't be angry. He said, I'm gonna get angry. I said, no, you have to tell me. I'm only gonna tell you if you promise that you're not gonna get angry. He said, okay, fine. What is it? He said, Sheikh, I've tried in the Surah Yusuf class, like 30 hours, 40 hours, just sitting in class and taking notes from you, class. I can't do it. And then I asked everyone else, and people just gave up. Like, I still did the whole thing, but the people gave up writing notes. Why? Because he's tangent after tangent after tangent after tangent after tangent. But what he does is that he always remembers where all the connections was. He's able to bring it back. If you and I did it, we can't do it. Sometimes 6 to 8 tangents. He's talking about this. He was talking in Surah Yusuf. He's talking about being thrown in a well. And then he talks about the idea that Musa alayhi salam was also thrown in water, right? And so then he talks about the fact that, but Musa's water was moving water, and well water is stagnant water. And that's why Musa's life moves him to a high maqam immediately, he becomes a prince. And because he was in stagnant water, he becomes a slave, because slave is stagnation. And then he talks about the different, he's doing this on the fly. Now we're taking us like, the verse says that his brothers threw him in the well. We're talking about Musa and his flight to princeship and stagnation. And then he went into the etymology of the word slave, and he talked about why Allah never in Surah Yusuf calls him like Abd of the Aziz in that sense, and he talks about why that's so important in the context of the surah. And then he comes back and it's like, yeah, everything's fine. So that's ordered chaos. Now, if someone is in that class, I can tell you that class was an experience. Everyone in that class was having like spirituals, like jaw drops at every 3 minutes. Like, did you just say that? Like, I've read the surah my whole life. I never saw this. I never saw this. I never saw this. What is happening? Right? Like, everyone there was looking at each other. It's like, you hear this? Like, what is happening? And the ladies were the best. The ladies figured out that there's no way you can take notes on this guy. Okay, so they all took their phones out and they recorded the whole thing, right? And the guys figured out after session 1 that that's what you're supposed to do with him, right? But there's people like that. So ordered chaos is that's your goal. You want to get to a point one day, inshallah, where you have so many nodes of wisdom embedded in your mind, and you can connect so many things together that when you come, you have a topic, the main verses and ahadith that you want to touch upon, the main, fiqhi or traditional points you want to hit. Everything is fill in the blanks. And what fills in the blank? Who your audience is. How did your day go today? Because that's going to affect your khutbah and your speech and your passion and everything. Speak about what you care about. If you are not invested in your topic and if it's just formal, it's not going to have the effect on people's hearts. Okay? I don't know what that says. I don't know what he wrote. Don't with confidence. If you make a mistake, fix it and don't get nervous. Okay, I think it says do it with confidence, not don't with confidence. Do it with confidence, which means if you make a mistake, it's all good. That's fine. Redress your wrong and continue. Most people don't even realize you're making a mistake. Okay? Unless there's students of knowledge in there, they don't know. So the optimum Jummah experience, and I think this is the last slide we'll do. You guys, this is a redacted version of a 2-day thing, okay? But we don't want to do the two-day thing. That's for like students of knowledge. So only a few of us would actually like pay attention to that. It's too long. If your salah afterwards is weak, now you've given the khutbah. You get up for your salah. And unless you're sick, like I'm sick, so I'm not expecting too much from like my Quran after, because I can't recite. But if your salah afterwards is weak, then the khutbah will not have the same impact. I can guarantee you this. Which means practice your surahs. If you're not a hafiz of the Quran, practice your. You should know what you're going to recite. You're not going to figure it out when you after Fatiha, the surah that you're going to recite. It's not going to be after Fatiha. You will know exactly what you're going to do in first rak'ah. You know exactly what you're going to do in second rak'ah. You'll be able to connect it to what your khutbah was about. So what was my khutbah about today? Yes. Health and time. Yes, it was about health and time. So what were the two passages that I recited? I recited Yahya alayhi salam's passage from Maryam that Ya Yahya khudil kitaba bi quwwa. Oh Yahya, take on this book seriously. Take on the Sharia seriously. Take on the religion seriously. Take on the Torah seriously. Don't be a waste. Don't be frivolous. Right? And the other passage was what وَمَنْ أَعْرَضَ عَنْ ذِكْرِي فَإِنَّ لَهُ مَعِيشَةً ضَنْكًا from Surah Al-Taha. That for those people who turn away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's reminder, then they will have difficulties along their way. In their livelihood, they will have difficulties, right? Which is, if you have good health and free time and you use it in the path of Allah, you'll be not turning away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? So now, does the audience have to know? Does the people have to know why I chose? No, it's for you. Because you are going to be very powerful after the khutbah. You're going to be passionate after the khutbah. So the Quran that you recite has to coincide with what you were talking about. Because it's going to affect your heart. And if it affects your heart becomes a conduit to every other heart in there. Right? The power of Jummah is that it pairs the khutbah with the salah. Do not denigrate the salah where you're just trying to get rid of the salah. It's not, that's half of the prayer. Half of the Jummah is the salah. Right? There are riwayat about this to make the salah longer. Now in our times, the ulama say don't do that because people have, the khutbah is the thing they understand. And they don't understand the salah. Most people don't understand the Quran in the salah. But for the Sahaba of the Prophet ﷺ, they would understand every verse that the Prophet ﷺ was reciting in his khutbah. So guess what? The Prophet's khutbah was actually less in time than his salah. It's the opposite. And that is the rule. That's the general. Now we are in a compromised state because no one will benefit from the Quran of the salah because they don't understand it. Yes, sir. So when we see hadith like that, very good point. When we see the hadith like that, the way that the Hanafis, and I'm sure this is the case in the other madhabs, is that if there's a report and it's a solitary report, all that means that the Prophet did recite A'la and Ghashiyah, and maybe he did it multiple times. That doesn't mean that's a prescription. Okay? It doesn't mean it's a prescription. You should remember that as a rule. Okay? If it was a prescription, what would the fuqaha do? All the madhabs would have done this. Right? Like Malik would have done this, Abu Hanifa would have done this, Shafi. They would have said, you recite this in the first rak'ah and you recite this in the second rak'ah. And no madhab does this. Okay? So it's a prescription. Sorry, it's a description of the Prophet's prayer. It's not a prescription that we do every single prayer that way. But point well taken. Know the fiqh of the salah well. So, study the legal aspects of your prayer. As an imam, you don't get to be ignorant of what is a valid prayer. You don't get to be ignorant. This is from the prerequisites. You have to know what, from a fiqh perspective, based on your madhab, is a valid salah. If you don't know that, you are not allowed to even be imam of Fajr, Dhuhr, Asr, Maghrib, Isha. Forget Jummah. Does everyone understand this? So learn that, and not don't read a book on it. Right? Learn it. Learn it with his teacher. Sit with the teacher. Say, I need you to teach me the salah, properly, from the beginning to the end. And you can use a matan, not matan, that's up to them. But they will sit there and will teach you. This is what a valid prayer is. If you do this. If this happens, do this. If this happens, do this. You have to know that. You're not allowed to lead people in salah unless you know that. You are standing there representing the Prophet ﷺ. Make sure no one is doubtful and uncomfortable about the prayer they have just performed. If there's someone behind you and they're thinking, well, this guy did this, I don't think the prayer is valid, then this is a problem. It causes a lot of fitna in the community. So you want to avoid that. Regardless of your position, wash your feet instead of the masah. So the reason I mention this is because there's a heavy ikhtilaf about doing masah over jawrab, which is what you and I are wearing right now, socks. There is ikhtilaf. So whatever your position is, I don't care. When you come to the masjid or the MSA and there are people behind you who their position is that you can't do masah over jawrab, you can only do masah over khuf. it has to be leather because that's a valid fiqhi position, then according to them, your wudu is not valid. And if you take that approach and you take the position that the niyyah of the imam and the validity of the imam's prayer affects the people behind, then from their position, your salah is invalid, which means their salah is invalid, and now that's a problem. So what do? You want to maximize the comfort level of everyone praying behind you from an ilmi direction. Okay? So take your socks off and do the proper wudu. Okay? Regardless of your knowledge, only recite in hafs. So this is the recommendation because not everyone is aware about the different qira'at. I know some of you, mashallah, are learning. You have ijazat. It's great. Great. That's all academics. Right? Because 99% of the people who just pray Jumu'ah with us will not know the other qira'at. And if you recite it and they've memorized that passage, they think you're making a mistake. Right? So if you're a masjid imam and this is your masjid community and you're used to doing this, no problem. You're used to reciting in different, like for example, Jamiat al-Ansar in Brampton. Has anyone prayed there? Jamiat al-Ansar in Brampton, like beside Trinity Mall? Okay, so the imam there is a really good friend of mine. Every single Isha, he experiments with a different qira'at and it's beautiful. If you get a chance to be in that area, go pray behind him. It's an absolute, it's beautiful. But everybody who's a regular there knows this. He's established a culture there, right? Because he's local. He's established, it's fine. Sheikh Abdullah at IMO, who passed away recently, right? Some of you know about him. He used to recite many times when he was younger. I mean, when he turned like this old, he wasn't. When he was younger, 15 years ago, when he was in that area, he was reciting different qira'at all the time, no problem. Community knows. But here, that's not the case. So you don't just drop intellectual bombs on people and say, Assalamu alaikum, I gotta go, you know, I got class. So you can't do that. Yes.
So my question would be, say for example, the imam is reciting a different qira'ah, and someone who memorized it starts correcting the imam, thinking that he said it wrong.
Yeah.
What does the imam do?
Good question. If the person continues to do it, then the imam should switch to hafs because they're messing everyone up. But if it's just one off, just ignore him because your prayer is valid, right? Yeah. So this is being annoying. Regardless of opinion you follow, make sure to do the khutbah in Arabic, to do some portion in Arabic because as you guys know, that there is a position that the khutbah must have an Arabic component. Okay, so regardless of which position you follow, do a portion of your khutbah in Arabic. Do some Quran tilawa. Do mention hadith. Mention the aqwal of the companions, or say some Arabic in both parts of the khutbah, the first and the second. Do not disregard the presence of the sisters in the majlis. They don't have their own imam. You are their imam, right? So you are representing the sisters as well. They don't have their own separate sisters imam somewhere. Okay, you're what they get as well. So be cognizant of that. Stay humble. We talked about this already. Stay humble before and after the khutbah. Don't walk in as if you expect people to move aside as you're walking through, right? Yeah. Don't expect special treatment even after the khutbah. Don't expect everyone comes to you, shakes your hand, and says Jazakallah khair. Amazing. Like, don't. Yeah, people ignore you. That's great. It's good for you. It's good for your nafs. Like, no one notices you. That's great. They just benefit from the khutbah and you're removed from the picture. This is the best possible scenario, right? Don't expect people to come say salam. Like, I was once with my father for a khutbah, and he rarely comes to my khutbahs because I'm on campuses, but sometimes I'm invited to masajids or we're traveling. And if we're traveling and the locals find out that I'm coming and they invite me to their masjid. And so once we were traveling, we're in Atlanta, and I gave a khutbah, and my dad, it's a family vacation. My brothers are there, my father's there. And so they're just not used to me being an imam, right? For them, I'm the weird kid, okay? Who's always like buried in books or something. They treat me like a normal person, obviously. To them, I'm just his son, right? So after the khutbah, I was outside and this like sister runs in. She has this little baby and she says, can you make dua for the baby? I'm like, yeah, do you mind holding, if I hold the baby? She's like, no. This is some old Arab, like probably the grandmother. She didn't look like the mother of this child. Right? She was like in her 50s or something. She gives me the baby. I'm holding the baby. I'm making dua for this baby. Right? My dad is there. And so my brother takes a picture of me, this baby, and my dad, right? And he sends it to my mom. My mom has no idea what's happening. And she's like, what is happening here in this picture, right?
Like, what is going on? It's this random baby. But the point is that for my father, this was odd. It's like, why would people just randomly give you their child? You know, why would she do it? I'm like, just getting some dua. It's like, why from you? Because in his head, he's like, what, why so random, right? It's hilarious. So deem yourself the weakest in iman from amongst the group, right? Like as you're standing there, don't think, Alhamdulillah, I have a very robust iman because I'm the imam. My iman is high because I'm the imam. No, it's like I am the lowest person here because I know my sins and I don't know anyone else's sins here. So on reflecting on my own sins, they're like objectively, I'm the worst person in this room because I don't know all your sins. I know all my sins, right? And I actually know sins that I have forgotten about that I should remember, which means that from just that perspective, I'm the worst person in this room, like objectively, right? The inaugural address of Abu Bakr, he actually says this. He says, I am not the best of you. And if I falter, it is your responsibility to tell me what to do, right? Okay, and this goes into a different thing. We'll stop here, inshallah ta'ala. I hope this was of some benefit. I actually have to be at an event at 7 and I haven't done Asr. So I wanted to request you guys, can we do Asr?